Chapter 6. Blessed by the Spirits. Doesn't that make it sound like he really is romantically interested in you, sis? Agnes's eyes widened. What a question. And coming from Kevin.
Perish the thought. He's a mushroom fetishist, you know. Please spare me the tasteless jokes.
Agnes shot down Kevin's suggestion as they sat together sipping tea. A mushroom popped up on the back of his hand, as if reflecting Agnes's feelings of indignation. The mushroom had a brownish-gray cap with a fat stem. Entoloma sarcopum. It was an edible mushroom, so Agnes planned to send it down to the kitchens later. Yeah, Kevin continued. But we've ruled out him doing this to smooth things over for Philip, or to keep clingy women away from him, right? Our family's friends with the royals, but there's nothing for them to gain from this. Despite all that, we've got the prince that everyone says is the serious sort, sending bouquets here every day and begging you to be his dance partner at the royal balls. If those aren't romantic overtures, then I don't know what are. Kevin plucked off the mushroom and looked at it. It had been a long time since Agnes had last sprouted one on him. Shrugging, he propped it up against the teapot. It looked nice there, Agnes reflected. Kind of artistic. She sighed and slowly put her teacup down on the table. Kevin acts wise beyond his years, but he's definitely still a child. Listen, Kevin. Think about this from the prince's point of view. I'm his cousin's jilted cast-off. I'm neither beautiful nor special. Plus, I have this awful pink hair. And I make mushrooms sprout everywhere I go, which is objectively weird. But I could still be useful to him as a shield against other women, and he can harvest my mushrooms at the same time. 2 birds with 1 stone, right? I'm just a convenient tool to him. Romance doesn't factor in at all. As Kevin's big sister, Agnes wanted to explain things gently, but he frowned. I knew it! Philip's really hammered your self-confidence. What a waste of space he is, brainless royal brat. And Prince Claude's motivations are highly suspicious, too. Kevin, stop bad-mouthing Philip. I understand the sentiment, but you can't say things like that in public. He's technically royalty, you know. I know that, sis. I'm not stupid. I just hate the way Philip's tainted your mind. He's made you ashamed of your gifts. Your hair, the divine protection offered by the spirits, your looks. Agnes hated the way Kevin was looking at her, eyes full of pity. Let me ask you this, sis. Do you feel any lingering grief over Philip dumping you? Not even a little. Agnes was delighted to be free of the cheating little twerp. Her indignant response made Kevin chuckle wryly. Well, I'm glad Philip's brainwashing doesn't extend that far then. But listen, sis. The world's full of all types of people, all with different ways of seeing things. The mushrooms... Actually, forget about the mushrooms for a second. Your pink hair and the spirit's divine protection you receive, there are people out there who will completely understand about that stuff. And you're saying the mushroom pervert's one of those people? Agnes asked dryly. Well, at any rate, he doesn't seem to dislike that stuff. That's good, right? Kevin has a point. Agnes was so taken aback and grossed out over Claude's mushroom fetish that she hadn't noticed. But it was true. Claude didn't seem to mind her hair at all. Maybe it was because he was too fixated on the mushrooms to even notice anything else about her. But unlike most people, he didn't seem to judge her based on her hair color. He was actually a pretty decent, unprejudiced kind of prince. You're right. Even if His Highness doesn't see me as a beauty, he at least doesn't seem to mind my hair. All he really cares about is the mushrooms. Agnes nodded thoughtfully as she mulled it all over. Meanwhile, Kevin's smile clouded over with a frown. See, this rate, Philip's lingering malicious influence could actually be lifted. Almost like desensitization therapy of sorts, slowly replacing the negative thoughts over your appearance, the divine protection you see as a curse, your social standing. Oh, curse that Philip, he really is a stain on humanity. Still, it's a blessing the brainwash wasn't absolute. Kevin was mumbling something to himself, but Agnes couldn't make out what.
Kevin? What's wrong?
Nothing. Just feeling a bit sorry for Prince Claude is all. Kevin reached out and flicked the entoloma sarcopum with his forefinger. It toppled onto its side next to the teapot. Recently, Agnes had started wearing her hair down and choosing colorful day dresses. Not having her hair scraped back made her head feel so much lighter. It was sort of fun, too. She'd never really minded wearing her hair up, but part of her had resented having to do so, just to evade Philip's whining. Having the freedom to choose her own hairstyle was actually a real mood lifter. Agnes was outside, strolling in the gardens, in the best mood she'd been in ages. The sky above was so blue that she just couldn't stay inside a moment longer. Along with her peach blossom hair, Agnes had another gift that resulted from her foreign blood. The divine protection of the spirits that lived in nature all around her. She could sense the spirits, and she could even tell how they were feeling sometimes. They appeared to her in the form of balls of light. Agnes thought she could sense happiness emanating from the light source. But people with this power were rare in the kingdom of Visage. By talking to the spirits, though, Agnes could receive their blessings. The mushrooms were one example of this. They seemed to respond to Agnes's emotions, although they often felt more like a curse than a blessing. And Agnes still had no idea why mushrooms, of all things, much less what purpose they were supposed to serve in her life. Agnes used to go out in the gardens and spend time chatting to the flowers. She thought she sensed the flower spirits listening. But Philip had overheard her one day and said it was creepy and gross. So she stopped doing that. She wasn't afraid of inciting Philip's anger. She'd just been sick of his complaining. At the time, she was also desperate to behave like a real aristocratic lady did, so she obeyed his demands. And so the days and months had passed. Agnes had stopped trying to sense the spirits or trying to communicate with them. A part of her hoped that the protective effects would begin to wane if she ceased contact. But the mushrooms kept on sprouting. In fact, she'd noticed that the mushroom effect had only grown more intense. She paused, gazing down at the flower beds by her feet.
Hello! Nice weather we're having today.
At the sound of Agnes's voice, the flowers swayed, though there was no breeze. Then, new buds began to burst open all around her. The flowers nearby were white, but for some reason, these bloomed deep pink.
Oh, is that in honor of my hair?
The flower heads bobbed as if nodding.
Oh, thank you so much. Can I display them in my room?
As if responding, another flower bed suddenly burst into bloom. Agnes giggled as she picked the flowers, thanking the spirits again. She knew it was them. She couldn't sense them like she used to, but she just knew they were listening to her, communicating with her. If she kept this up every day, perhaps she'd be able to align her soul with theirs again. Back in her room, Agnes asked Therese to put the flowers in a vase. As she took the flowers, Therese exclaimed, "How unusual! I've never seen flowers this shade of pink before." The spirits must have changed the color of the flowers just for her, Agnes realized. She couldn't firmly sense their presence, but she knew they bore no ill will from the way they'd responded to her. It was like reuniting with old friends, and it made Agnes's heart glad. She smiled, and the flowers swayed in the vase.
Which means
I might be able to do a little test." Agnes smiled, stroking the bobbing petals. During her commoner days, Agnes used to sell spirit-blessed medicinal herbs to make a little spending money. She'd needed to sell her wares via a specialist shop, but it'd be plain to see that her medicinal herbs were of a far superior quality than the standard. Selling too many herbs would draw suspicion, cautioned her parents, so Agnes had made sure to only sell a few at a time. The mushrooms she could sell too, except Agnes could never control what kind of mushrooms she'd sprout or how many, so they weren't much of a moneymaker. But maybe I can try making medicinal herbs again? It'd be faster to try to increase the potency of already existing herbs. But she realized it was too difficult to head into the forest for foraging while she was still the daughter of a count. She'd hate the kind of rumors and scandal that might bring her family.
Could try growing them in the garden, though.
As a kid, Agnes had tended a vegetable plot and flower garden. No doubt she could use a garden hoe better than any other young noblewoman could. So, Agnes borrowed a corner of the garden and began planting fast-growing herbs. She was excited about the opportunity to make enough money for her new life. It also felt great to move her body and dig around in the dirt. It was really sinking in now just how much of a boring and dull life she'd been living in an attempt to please Philip. Now that she was free again, she actually felt relieved that he'd cheated on her and dumped her. It was almost kind of funny. Then the day of the next ball came. Agnes's room was practically a flower shop by now, since Claude had been sending a fresh bouquet every single day since the last ball. She could see the spirits again by this point. The balls of light flittered around the room, going from flower to flower. They seemed happy. But what concerned Agnes was how all this was being paid for. Surely it wasn't being funded by the royal coffers. If it was, she really wished Claude would stop. But according to Maurice, the flowers were being paid for out of Claude's own pocket. Agnes didn't think much of that. But Maurice had started pretending to be deaf whenever she tried to argue the point with him. She was going to have to bring it up with Claude himself. As if it wasn't bad enough that she had to get in a carriage and go to the royal ball. Now she had to negotiate with the pervert as well. Agnes sighed, looking down at the ball gown she was wearing. It was a simple, pale yellow dress, covered with lighter material, which was embroidered with silver thread, floral embroidery. Every time she moved, the beads sewn into the embroidery work sparkled. It was a beautiful dress indeed. In her hair, she wore a cloth hair ribbon covered in matching silver thread, which was woven into her curls. The rest of her hair was left to flow loosely. Where her ears poked through her hair, yellow quartz earrings could be seen dangling. She also wore a yellow quartz hair comb in her peach blossom-colored hair. It's cute, but I just don't feel comfortable. 6 years of being engaged to Philip. All that time spent trying to hide my hair and look as plain and ordinary as possible. It was a shock to the system, suddenly appearing in public dressed up so fine and colorful. The seamstress had left right after the fitting, so Agnes had no chance to give her own input on what she wanted the dress to be like. She was shocked by how little time passed before the completed dress was delivered. It seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. And all of the decisions had clearly been made by someone who wasn't her. Naturally, Agnes had no intention of following Philip's usual suggestions and ordering a drab dress. But she would have pushed for something a bit more modest and understated in both design and color. If only they'd bothered to actually consult her. It's clear that nobody cares about my opinion at all, huh? It looked like Claude wanted her as flashy and showy as possible. And it was also clear that he placed a lot of trust in the royal seamstress to deliver the kind of dress that had fit his request. Agnes heaved a sigh as the carriage swayed and clattered along the road.
Huh?
Agnes muttered in surprise as they drew up to the palace and the carriage door opened. This was the palace entrance, all right. Agnes was supposed to alight the carriage here. But why was Claude standing right outside the carriage door?
Good evening, Lady Agnes.
The fourth-born royal prince smiled at her, those dark gray eyes glittering.
Good evening, but what are you doing here, Your Highness?
Did he have some special business here? Or perhaps he was on a stroll and happened to spot her carriage?
I came to greet you, of course. You promised to let me be your escort to the ball.
Oh, right. Yes, that was our arrangement.
But somehow Agnes had never expected the fourth-born royal prince to greet her carriage personally. Half sick with nerves and unsure what to do, Agnes could only watch as a cluster of yellow mushrooms sprouted from Claude's shoulder. They were long and thin, and looked like tiny worms stretching to the sky. Clavelinopsis helvola, they were called. Most ordinary people would probably scream if they found a cluster of yellow, worm-like fungi sprouting from their shoulder. But the mushroom fetishist himself wasn't ordinary. Instead, his eyes sparkled with fresh delight.
Wow, you didn't even have to touch me to sprout them this time.
Claude turned his handsome smile on Agnes. It was almost as if he was pleased with her, and not just her mushrooms.
Yes. Sometimes they sprout sans direct contact. Usually contact produces a stronger mushroom effect, though.
Claude casually plucked the yellow, wormy mushrooms off and placed them onto a tray held out by a waiting servant.
Why was there a servant waiting there with a tray?
Agnes wondered. But she decided not to dwell on that. There wasn't much room for pondering, just at that moment anyway. Anyway, the answer probably wouldn't do her much good mentally.
That dress looks great on you. Look, these mushrooms are the same color.
Claude held his hand out to her as he paid her dress, a compliment. Why was he smiling in such a twinkling manner? Was he pleased over his newly acquired Clavelinopsis helvola? She was so hoping he'd awaken from this madness and let both Agnes and her mushrooms go free. But that seemed to be less likely with every passing second.
The prince's fetish ran too deep.
And yes, she knew he only wanted her for her mushrooms.
But must he be quite so blatant about it? She thought. He's a prince after all, isn't he? At least in public, couldn't he try to cover up his fetish with even a thin veneer of respectability?
Paper thin, like the rice starch sheets used to wrap candy?
Yeah, that's all I ask.
Shall we go then?
Agnes took hold of his proffered, white-gloved hand. Immediately, a small mushroom popped up on the back of it. It looked like Rickenella fipula. She recognized it by the orangey-yellow cap. Claude quickly plucked it off and stuck it in his jacket pocket. He did it with a smooth, practiced air.
Yeah, he's getting far too good at that.
The prince was clearly the type to do things properly.
Your Highness, thank you for the dress. Oh, and the accessories.
Agnes had been expecting the custom-tailored dress, of course. But she'd been taken aback when it was delivered with the yellow quartz hair comb, earrings, the hair ribbon embroidered with silver thread, the shoes, and the gloves. And everything was extremely high quality. It was all too much. Claude had really gone overboard. But whether it was a sign of his mushroom mania or simply a point of royal pride, Agnes couldn't tell.
You're welcome. I knew I was right. Bright colors really do suit you best, Lady Agnes. You look beautiful.
Claude twinkled. Just then, 3 more Rickenella fibulas sprouted up the length of his arm.
Must he twinkle so indiscriminately?
Agnes thought. He might be a freak, and his romantic intentions up for debate. But he was still a very handsome young man. Anyone would tense up, being smiled at someone like him.
Thank you. I heard that you paid for this dress out of your own pocket instead of the royal coffers.
Yup.
Please don't. It's too much of a fuss over a nobody like me. The last dress you gave me was already going too far. I would have happily worn it again, even. There was no need for you to prepare me a whole new outfit.
The last one was a rush job. Wasn't even properly tailored to you. Anyway, I bought you the outfit because I wanted to see you in it. You don't need to worry about a thing.
Even so, Agnes was worried. How could she not be? She was still deliberating over how to answer him when they arrived at the ballroom. Here was the fourth-born prince, escorting the jilted woman again. Naturally, every eye in the room turned to them. By Claude's side, Agnes couldn't hear any snide remarks, but she could guess what everyone would be saying if they could. The thought made her stomach knot, and her mushroom early warning sensors began tingling. Most of the harshest looks came from other young women. Agnes knew that they saw her as a bothersome fly, one that had gotten a foothold on the tempting honeypot that was Prince Claude. Agnes knew that focusing on the dirty looks too much would only result in a fresh crop of mushrooms. So she tried to turn her thoughts of the carefree commoner's life that surely awaited her once this was all over.
Shall we dance?
Okay. It looked like he was going to force her either way, so Agnes had no choice but to accept. Claude took Agnes by the hand and led her to the center of the ballroom, where they began dancing to the music performed by the royal orchestra. As a mere commoner, Agnes had never even seen dancing until she was adopted. She'd had to suffer through years of lessons to learn how. Now, she was a competent dancer, but she had nothing on Claude's practiced ease or his dynamic flair. The chasm between his royal status and her own lowly standing had never been more evident to her than this moment. He led competently. All she had to do was follow. But mentally, this dance was a battle of wills for her. Every now and then as they danced, yellow worm-like mushrooms would sprout from the backs of Claude's hands. But without missing a step, he simply plucked them off and stashed them in his pockets. They were probably the same Clavelinopsis helvola as before, but Claude moved so fast that Agnes didn't have time to make sure. It was unmistakable. Claude's reflexes regarding the mushrooms had really sped up.
However does he manage to perform his royal duties when his mind is this focused on mushrooms all the time? Never mind his royal duties, what does he do out of the palace on night business? Surely he encounters all kinds of mushrooms in the wild. Maybe the other knights know about his fungus fetish. Maybe they even have a nickname for him. The Knight of Shrooms or something. Knight of Shrooms? I'm losing it.
A mental image popped into Agnes's mind of Claude wearing a giant mushroom cap on his head. An Amanita muscaria cap, of course. Bright red, like the red thread of fate that terribly bound the two of them together. Oh dear, the mushroom toxins have clearly invaded my brain. It was all too much. The angry eyes on her, the strain it took to hold the mushrooms at bay. Agnes sighed, which drew a glance from Claude.
Are you growing tired?
Huh? Oh, sorry. How rude! Sighing like that while dancing with His Highness. Even ruder than imagining him with a giant mushroom cap on his head. I should picture him as the Mushroom King instead. That seems more proper.
Now she could see Claude in her mind's eye, wearing a mushroom-shaped crown. Agnes's eyes widened in alarm as she found herself choking back laughter. Claude narrowed his eyes, looking regretful.
I'm so sorry. I can see I've been pushing you too far. Shall we take a little break?